The World Wars. This is my Module 7 Learners Challenge. Be the teacher. World War One. How did it start? So to remember the main causes of World War One, there is a helpful mnemonic, main, although some use mania with an extra A to include the assassination that finally sparked the war, like directly sparked it. But anyways, M is for militarism, which is how it contributed to the war was in a sort of feedback loop. The different nations of Europe had started to build up their militaries in response to each other to try and stay ahead of the others. This included weapon supplies, increased enlistment, and as the war was the most common settler of disputes among nations at the time, and throughout history before it, it was seen that whichever country had the better military would fare better if anything were to start. And while this wasn't a direct cause of World War One, it contributed to a factor of the war that made it so different than previous wars: the fact that nations had way more powerful militaries and advanced weapons and technology. A is for alliances. While also not technically a direct cause, alliances are what made World War One a world war. The two main alliances that had formed between World War One were the Triple Alliance with Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente with France, Britain, and Russia. So while these alliances protected each other from threat of war and they made countries stronger, they also meant that if two nations were to start a war together, then many other countries would be instantly involved. I is for imperialism. Rivalries developed between countries expanding empires in specific regions. This led to tension between various nations and also created competition in which nations would fight to gain the most colonies, which was, also causing tension. And N stands for nationalism. Citizens of nations formed a sense of extreme nationalism, and this was a source of tension in some cases. For example, ethnic groups like the Slavs wanted independence. And then finally, the spark. In 1914, Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, assassinated Archduke of Austria-Hungary Franz Ferdinand. Austria-Hungary then declared war on Serbia, which spread through alliances, starting to involve many countries. And then, obviously, the process of mobilization started. So what made this war different? World War I wasn't really the first world war, but it was called World War One because of how unique it was from previous wide-scale wars. Primary difference is that of technology and tactics, like, for example, machine guns, poisonous gases, trench warfare, submarines, tanks, stuff like that. And the effect of these new technology was that this war saw rapidly developing technology and use of new strategies to defeat opposition, and this pattern would commonly reoccur among following wars like World War II. In between wars, so after World War I ended, most economies in Europe fell significantly due to proximity and involvement in the war, but the U.S., being across an ocean, fared much better. They were doing so much better, in fact, that they began loaning money to other countries, especially Germany, under the Dawes Plan. However, a bit of dependence on the U.S. formed because of this. So in 1992, when the stock market crashed, it led to a domino effect, which ruined the U.S. economy in a number of ways. And because many nations depended on the U.S., their economies were also affected. Some responses to the Great Depression were increased militarism, like in Italy, Germany, and somewhat Japan. Other responses came in the form of economic plans like FDR's The New Deal or Lenin's New Economic Policy. Before World War II, the result of World War I, the Great Depression, and a number of other factors led to radical and extreme leaders gaining power in Italy and Germany. So in Germany, there's Adolf Hitler, who became the leader of the Nazi Party, whose goals were to create a united Germany through expansion as well as through exclusion of Jews and non-Germans who were not pure. Hitler published Mein Kampf while in prison, a book highlighting his and the Nazi Party's goals and plans for the future of Germany. Afterwards, through speeches, marches, and other events, Hitler and the Nazi Party gained much power in the German government. In 1932, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and through militarism brought them out of the Great Depression, which garnered more public support for the Nazi Party. In Italy, there was Benito Mussolini, a rebellious man since childhood who took power through a coup which he organized with his supporters of the National Fascist Party. Mussolini was respected through his strict leadership and admired for his lively, energetic character, which he exhibited in speeches and whatnot. Similarly to Hitler, he garnered some support through bringing his country out of the Great Depression through increased military production, and in 1936 he formed an alliance with Hitler. So, World War II. Germany, Italy, and Japan formed an alliance over similar goals and a hatred for communism, and after a series of conferences called the Munich Conference occurred, Hitler was allowed to invade Czechoslovakia in the hopes that this would satisfy him and stop war from occurring. However, this just allowed Hitler to invade his first area of land without any repercussions. When he later invaded Poland, war started with France and Britain declaring war on Germany. And while the U.S. was only initially involved in that it gave weapons and supplies to the Allied powers, after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, a naval base containing a U.S. fleet of ships, the U.S. declared war on Japan. Then Germany and Italy were triggered to declare war on the U.S. and so on. World War II continued. During World War I, Soviet Union was taken out of the war through a pact with Germany, ending war on the Eastern Front. Hitler signed another non-aggression pact between the two countries in 1939, which remained in place until Germany crossed it later. War on the Eastern Front was cold, treacherous, and left many hungry. Hitler continuously pushed his weak army forward, and while they did have some success early on, especially at Leningrad, they began to grow weaker and lacked supplies to continue. The Soviet Union then pushed them out. However, this was one of the deadliest theaters of World War II. And then on the Western Front, Germany had invaded Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, and eventually France. Starting in 1941, there was very little land fighting on the Western Front. However, when the British and Americans landed in Normandy, they succeeded and slowly took back control of France in the next few months. And then, in early 1945, the Allied forces overpowered and invaded Germany. The most shocking and tragic part of the World Wars was the Holocaust, which was the Nazi Party's plan to eradicate Germany of all Jews and other non-Germans, started with anti-Semitic laws and developed into Hitler's plan to kill mass amounts of people with concentration camps and poisonous gas chambers called the Final Solution. This was able to happen through mass manipulation, propaganda, and fear. Nazis ended up killing 11 million people, including 6 million Jews, as well as homosexuals, disabled people, Romas, political opponents, and anyone who threatened Hitler's power, which is kind of just political opponents. After liberation, though, many felt and were lost. Holocaust survivors were commonly placed in displaced persons camps, where they could converse with people with similar experiences while they were waiting to emigrate. Overall, the Holocaust was traumatic for all involved, including survivors, soldiers, and the public as well. Thanks for watching.